Hey guys, it's Paul, combat veteran, MMA fighter, YouTuber. You asked for it. We're doing it. Bricky's every faction in Warhammer 40k Part 2. Let's go.
Hey all, this is part 2 in a two-part series on the Warhammer races. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, we do the Imperium of Man. You can check that out in the description, and I would highly recommend you watch that to get context for this episode. If you already have, go ahead and keep on watching. So after an entire episode of nothing but humans, we can now talk about chaos, which involves humans again, but a little bit less. We also got demons and shit.
I just felt someone grab my ass.
What?
Like hard, Nick.
So, as I've mentioned many times before, we've discussed the warp, the immaterium, the hellish landscape, the purgatory dimension realm between the material realm of our existence. Now, in the warp, it's terrifying, horrible, there are demons everywhere, things are crazy, all your minds and thoughts and emotions get projected there. It is both formless and empty, it is vast and tiny, it obeys the laws of time and physics while simultaneously does absolutely nothing of the sort. It is a hodgepodge and a culmination of just unknowable, eldritch, horrifying shit. And there are 4 gods.
I gotta say, if there's one thing that I've learned from the lore so far, it's that the warp is the biggest deus ex machina in the Warhammer 40k universe. It lets you get away with everything. Characters you don't like, you want them to time travel? Warp. Right? You want to turn one of your good characters bad? Warp. Just lets you solve all your problems at once.
That permeate in chaos and the warp. These are the 4 major chaos gods. And if we wish to learn about chaos, we need to learn about each and every single one of these chaos gods. First up, we have Khorne, and he is the easiest. Khorne is your classic Satan. He is all about anger, murder, fighting, blood, guts, death. You ever heard the term blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne? That's Khorne. The whole idea is that he is all about the fury and strength of battle. He doesn't care where blood comes from, so long as blood is flowing. He wants to fight and murder and carnage and slaughter and death, 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 death. That is Khorne. Very simple to understand.
So here's what's sort of interesting about Khorne, or the idea of this singular god of all slaughter and violence, is that in human history, that's not really how cultures would characterize it. They would actually have tons of different gods, and not all of them, or even a majority, seem to be bad or negative or evil. Right? The Egyptians had 14 different gods associated with war or violence, including Menhit, which her name is also She Who Massacres, which, yeah, Warhammer, you guys missed the boat with cornflakes over there. You should have had Menhit, She Who Slaughters, as your god of war, right? The Egyptians also had Montu, who was the god of war, but the god of war, valor, and the sun, right? So you had, again, a different facet of war, not the slaughtering or the massacring, but the valorous, defense, or the valor in battle. The Celts had 19 different gods associated with war. The Greeks had 27, including Kai-Doimos, who was the god of the din of battle, and Phanoi, the spirit of slaughter, which is another great one, the spirit of slaughter. Come on, guys. You guys can do better.
Next up, you have Zeach, and Zeach is the god of change. However, the god of change, it permeates in so many different other ways. He's the most eldritch of all the demon gods. He has this weird way to always be plucking at the strings of the universe. He's always conniving and scheming and doing his best to cause as much little bullshit as he can. Zeach is unknowable. Everything that makes sense, he will and won't do. Every future and setting and every type of destiny or fate is all foretold and also changeable. It is set in stone while also completely random. He knows what everything is going to happen and also that none of it's going to happen. You would ask Zeach a question. That question leads to 3 more questions. And those questions lead to the heat death of the universe, which asks 4 answers to those questions. And then he thinks to himself, what are questions even really? And are you even asking the questions? Or are you simply giving paths to answers and other horse shit? Zeach is just, I'm gonna fuck with stuff. He is yes and he is no. He is the understanding and he is complexity. He is unknowable. And that's what the God of Change is about. Very bizarre. And he likes birds a lot. I don't know why. Next.
Okay, this is probably, this guy doesn't even seem like a chaos god in the negative sense, right? Because all I've heard is the god of inquiry, the god of progress, the god of understanding or the struggle to understand the universe around you, the god of choosing your own fate. And honestly, philosophically, he sounds a lot more advanced than ancient peoples seemed to characterize their gods, right? They seemed to have gods that responded to immediate things in their environment, right? To explain the things that they observed, like the sun, the moon, the stars, you know, or battle, warfare, fertility, etc. But the idea of change and progress, you might see it in things like there might be a god of the seasons, maybe a god of the harvest, that might be even, but even the idea of like a god of time as a distinct entity is a lot more modern than most religions. But again, commenters, let me know if I'm missing something, if there are ancient cultures that put together gods of more theoretical concepts like time and change and inquiry. But again, I'm not hearing, like I'm hearing a lot of the bad things that happen, right? The god of sort of things going haywire, the god of things breaking in ways that aren't expected, the god of, you know, it sounds like the god of MMA upsets, right? Again, I'm not hearing something intrinsically bad. Just like Khorne, again, in human history, we don't identify the Khorne themes as being intrinsically bad or evil, right? We recognize, of course, the slaughter, you know, ancient peoples probably recognized that the slaughter of their people was a bad thing, but the slaughter of their enemies was a good thing. And so is she who slaughters a good god or a bad god? The answer is she was probably just a god.
Next up we got Papa Nurgle. Papa Nurgle, he loves you for who you are. Probably not. He will murder you just the same. But Papa Nurgle is about rot, pestilence, death, and decay. He is the end of everything. Him and Zeach do not like each other very much because where Zeach represents change and adjustment, Nurgle represents stagnation and death. He is all about miasma and pestilence and large bloat and pus and organs and people just being sedentary, sloth. He is the idea that everything will rot and decay and die. Nothing is certain besides decay and death. All of us will end up the same way, and broken down through just sheer never-ending decomposition. So the joke that Nurgle always loves you is generally because of that, because we all end up the same. We all rot, and we all die and wither. That's Nurgle, and he's got a general theme of course, pestilence and different kinds of diseases and sickness and things of that nature. That's generally Nurgle. He's pretty easy to understand as well, and he chunk. Finally, we have...
Yeah, I know it's easy to think, oh, Nurgle, the god of disease and sloth and sedentariness is intrinsically bad. But one of the things that's interesting to think about, at least for me, is one, a lot of our notions of disease are some ways getting flipped on their head, right? I think about, for example, the way a lot of modern medicine uses reprogrammed viruses to deliver better outcomes for people, right? The CRISPR is the classic example. You've got CRISPR is an actual programmed virus in which you basically tell the virus, hey, instead of infecting cells to make more of you, the virus, I want you to infect cells to give them a different DNA message. So the classic example that I actually just read about fairly recently was the children with the genetic disorder that gives them no immune system. They don't have the genes to make an immune system. So they have to live in a bubble. Like, that's the bubble boy stereotype. He's the person who had this disorder. Well, by programming a little virus using CRISPR and telling it, hey, you're going to go into these cells and you're going to rewrite some genes so that they, instead of having no immune system, you give them an immune system, they're able to go in, reprogram them on the DNA level, and give them an immune system. Right? They just released the results of the study, and it's overwhelmingly successful. You have kids who would have been dead in months, right, living in the regular lives in the real world, are now in school, they are playing, they get sick and recover. It's really nothing short of a miracle.
Have the youngest of the Chaos Gods, and that is Slaanesh, also known as the Prince of Pleasure or the God of Unspeakable Excess. Slaanesh is generally referred to with sex, but it's not only sex, it's just that's a good avenue if you want to make stuff. Slaanesh is just the idea of the senses of the body being cranked to not just 11, but more like 17. See, we'll discuss Slaanesh a little bit more when we talk about the Eldar, because they done fucked up, but it, or whatever, is mainly about just the excess of emotions. And therefore, sex is generally a large part of it. However, it's mostly pain and torture. Lots of pain, torture, but sometimes sexually related or drug related. Lots of drugs. Lots of drugs. Slaanesh gets off on everything. Extremes in happiness, extremes in sadness, extremes in pain and sadism and masochism. And of course that goes along with the sex part of it as well. It's generally referred to with sex because of the color scheme, very purple, lots of exposed genitalia. A lot of their models have like exposed nipples and stuff. And that is generally the theme you go for from a physical side, but it really embodies everything. Mainly pain and also the excessive amounts of emotion. So when it comes down to it, you'll find a lot of them have things like spikes or whips or any kind of BDSM style gear because it is unspeakable excess, the Prince of Pleasure. Everything in excess to the point where it is just sheer frightening. That is Slaanesh in a nutshell. A little bit bizarre and a little hard to describe sometimes, but as we talk more about the Dark Eldar later in this video, you'll understand it far, far better and far more than you'd want to. They might be...
Again, so in ancient human history, right, we never really rolled up even a lot of these ideas about like decadence. That's something of a modern spin on things. The idea of a god of over-pleasuring, over-sexed. This is something that it doesn't seem like ancient peoples ever really got into. You have a ton of gods of fertility, which I think of when you talk about the god of sex is, to me, the god of fertility. And there's no shortage of fertility gods. Egypt had like 14. Rome had like 26 different fertility-associated gods. And obviously, it didn't view them as being bad. This wasn't something that was negative. And again, if you look back at ancient peoples and ancient gods, they didn't have, well, one, decadence was something that you constantly strived for. Right, so you would have a god of the harvest who you would pray would grant you a good harvest so that you could eat well, knowing that future harvests may be poor and you won't eat well. So there was nothing decadent about eating a lot when times were good. There was probably just an acceptance of this year things are good. The god of the harvest has smiled upon us, right? The god of fertility has given us a new generation of the tribe. But, like, there was no negative sense of, like, well, you had to have a lot of sex to do it. Oh, pretty bad. You know, oh, you had to eat a whole lot this year. Like, pretty negative.
Thinking, why would anyone ever want to join Chaos? They all look horrifying, screwed up, and just frightening things, right? Well, the thing is that, of course, one, your mind is put into the warp and the Immaterium, so you can be easily swayed by Chaos demons when they get into your head, especially if you're a psyker. Sometimes regiments of the less mentally strong people, whether they be civilians or, say, low-level guardsmen or conscripts, can be easily swayed by this and become Chaos cultists and stuff, and they serve their dark gods, whatever god they personally prefer. However, and this might seem strange, Chaos in their own right isn't necessarily evil. See, the warp is every manifestation of emotion and being, every soul, everything of existence. This includes all the good things. All the different Chaos gods have another side to their coin. Khorne might be death, murder, slaughter, slaughter, but he's also got this weird sense of survival of the fittest, trial by combat, and honor. Khorne will never lie to you. Khorne will never stab you in the back. Khorne isn't about conniving and scheming. Khorne is about straight up mono-e-mono, you versus me, get in the ring, we're gonna murder each other hard right now.
Yeah, see, that's the thing that it seems like ancient human religions really dialed in on. The fact that these sort of concepts of war and battle and violence, they have a, I don't want to say a purifying aspect to it, but there is a positive aspect, right? You can't have ideas like, you know, honor and valor and self-sacrifice and the willingness to put yourself at harm for the protection of others without the other side of the coin, which is the violence and slaughter and loss. And I'm also always curious, Big E did more to feed Khorne blood than almost anybody, right? He rallied, you know, all the forces of Terra and Mars and just went out a-conquering. And he did not sound like a guy who shied away from a fight. Big E was more than willing to slaughter whole planets that didn't agree with his highly specific ideology, and he was and continues to be willing and very, very comfortable exterminating entire races of aliens. So the idea that the Emperor is somehow the anathema to the Chaos Gods while simultaneously just pouring blood into Khorne's mouth, just like a big gulp, like one of those over-the-top big gulps that, you know, you can get at the truck station, just constant, right? So, kind of weird.
May not be a good thing at the end of the day, but it is that other side of the coin. Him and Zeach generally don't get along because Zeach is that conniving schemer, but he's also about the idea of hope. Where there is change for your predicament. There is change for your problem. The hope of the galaxy, the ability to bend the world to your will, the idea that your fate is not set in stone, but in reality that you control your own destiny and can control it whenever you want, the changer of ways. That is Zeach. And of course, Zeach and Nurgle hate each other because while Nurgle does...
Again, we see Big E feeding the Chaos Gods, right? Here's a guy, the Emperor, looking out and saying, humanity needs me. I am going to rise to the top. I'm going to restore mankind to its former glory through conquest, through reshaping the map of the entire galaxy. Sounds like he's feeding right into Zeach, right? I mean, you couldn't talk about changing dramatically the fate and outcome of millions of people. That sounds like classic Zeach. You know, heresy alert, guys. Heresy alert. We're getting heretical here. Burp, burp, burp. But this is the truth. This is the truth. And again, this is why, well, as we discussed, you know, ancient peoples didn't really seem to have these sort of conception. They didn't embody gods with like the god of change, the god of time. They were a little too theoretical. But it's hard to say. I mean, Zeech also has to be the god of science and the god of progress. He has to be, because he is the god of changing, of going from unknowing to knowing, the god of going from unbuilt to built. And again, the Emperor, right? He had a vision of an Imperium, and he rendered it into existence through force of will and through his willingness to embrace the philosophy of Khorne. So you're stuck with this reality of, like, how can someone who is anathema to the Chaos Gods serve them more greatly than almost any other being in the universe?
Represents stagnation, death, and decay. He also represents finality and ending. The fact that you can be mentally at peace knowing that you will end and how you will end. Fear of the unknown, fear of change is not present with Nurgle. With Nurgle, everything will rot and die, and that provides that finality, that ability that this is over. We are all the same, and we will all end the same. We know the meaning of life. The meaning of life is to live and die and rot. And with that, it brings peace of mind. Slaanesh is a lot more...
Again, Zeach, you've got Nurgle, right? And it's hard to say that there's good in death and decay. Yes, things have to rot and decay, but new life needs that to emerge, right? The new season, the new life, the new everything has to bloom from the corpses of the old ways. And again, we look at Big E, the Emperor, who, of course, had to obviously kill a lot of people, but also his Imperium was built. And a giant theme of the Imperium is searching out and rebuilding from the ashes of the old empire of mankind, right? The original age of strife. And so, again, the collapse of the old order was necessary to build the new one.
Simple. While they are the excess of emotion, they are also the representation of emotion. Slaanesh embodies happiness. Slaanesh embodies excitement and joy and pleasure, not only in the sense of the physical, BAM! Style of pleasure, but also everything else like food and drink and air on your cheek and sunlight, the feeling, emotion and feeling. All of that is also represented with Slaanesh. So you have to ask, why are they always represented as super evil skulls?
Yeah, and again, you have Slaanesh tied into, I think, of the idea of longing, right? The desire for more, desire. And you have that emotion, right? Because, gluttony. Gluttony is firmly in Nurgle's camp. But what is gluttony but a love of the sensation of food? And we all do it, right? We all have our favorite food, and when it's delicious, it's so good, right? So Slaanesh and Nurgle, instead of being in competition, naturally feed together, right? It's also super common to see the lust for battle, the desire to slaughter your enemies, the hate of warfare, the burning desire for revenge, pure Khorne and pure Slaanesh. So again, this is probably why ancient human peoples had 15 stinking gods for these things, because they realized that they all sort of feed on top of each other and also capture so many different things that having singular broad conceptual gods was almost not fitting. And I actually I am sort of puzzled by the idea that these are all forces of evil when, like, they're intrinsic forces of the universe. And I think it's sort of insane and ridiculous that the Emperor is out there, like, trying to suppress them and thinking that he has the hubris, right, that he can beat back the Chaos Gods. He can end change in the universe, that he can end people, he can end dying. Like, you're trying to end dying by slaughtering races wholesale? Like, what are you trying to do, my man? Anyway, in conclusion, the Gellar Field failed, and I have been corrupted by chaos.
And spikes on everything and want to murder everybody. I don't really got an answer for you on that one. My assumption is that because mentally humans may think worse thoughts, even if we don't act on them, and therefore they're projected in the warp more. That one's a little bit weird. I don't know. This is me spitballing right now, but I don't know. You need a super bad guy. You already got the Imperium of Man. You need somebody to be a little bit worse than them. So you got demons. Honestly,
right? You could sell every single one of those gods as being both good, and you could sell them as being manifestations of the Emperor. Just like the Emperor is manifested as the Omnissiah, right? The Emperor's the Emperor's desire to crush his enemies, right? The Emperor's desire to lay waste to the empires of the aliens. The Emperor's desire to rebirth and to achieve glory for humanity. Right? All of these things are deeply embedded in what we call chaos. And, I mean, look at the guy's armor, man. His armor is all gold and shiny. He loves his hair. In every portrait, man, that dude just is a walking L'Oreal commercial. You know? You think Slaanesh isn't there? Like, you know, you think that's not a little Slaanesh-y, right? A little bit of vanity, you know? A little bit of preening. Yeah, that's pretty Slaanesh-y right there. And, again, as a guy who was, like, so bothered by the fact that humanity didn't have their old empire, that he wanted to rebirth it, that's peak Zeach. Anyway, yeah, this is hilarious. I just love that people just unquestioningly are like, the Chaos Gods are all bad. The Emperor says they're bad. They're definitely bad. And like, yeah, okay, the Chaos Demons seem really bad. But again, I rely on sort of the commenters to like flesh this out for me.
See, who cares? I just want to buy like a bird magician. Look at him. So cool. So combining all this together, on the tabletop, Chaos Demons are generally very melee-based. They run in, go really hard. You have lots of summoning and conjuring, tons of spells. Generally a little bit frail, but they have special saves to make them a little bit stronger. You've got giant demons and smaller demons. You got hordes of little boys and tons of big guys. Demons are...
Okay, heresy theory alert. What if these horrible demons representing each Chaos God are manifestations of the Imperium's perception of these things? Right? So, like, if you're like, Slaanesh, she makes it taste great when we have a bountiful harvest, then, like, Slaanesh would be, like, looking like Athena, right? But if you're the Imperium and you're like, sex is evil, if you feel good or bad, you're contributing to Slaanesh, and she's horrible, and she wants to destroy the universe. Then, like, yeah, what's going to show up out of the warp? But, you know, a half-naked spike monster, you know? Same with Nurgle, right? If you're like, oh, Nurgle represents completing the circle of life, then, like, maybe Nurgle would just be, like, I don't know, like the guy in the robe with the scythe who just kind of takes your hand and walks you off into the darkness. But because the Imperium is so committed to the evil of the Nurgle Chaos God and his pestilence, then what shows up but a giant overweight demon with their organs falling out? I don't know, if your goal is to manifest demons in the warp, being absolutely terrified of them and being convinced that they are an unspeakable, unquenchable, unbeatable evil, seems like the way to do it.
As they seem. Demons. Nurgle is slow, Khorne is super scary in melee, you've got Zeach who are far more into psychers and spellcasting, and then Slaanesh who is all melee, really fast but squishy, but in lots of hordes of tons of melee and pain damage, of course. So overall, the demons are a huge part of 40k and a massive threat to almost every single faction with the exception of a couple. However, the big part about demons is also transferred into the other 9 Primarchs we didn't talk about, which are the Chaos Space Marines.
Ooh, sorry guys, we're going to stop it there, right? Buckle up. Next episode, we're going to look at the 9 Chaos Corrupted Primarchs, which apparently include me. I'm kidding, I'm not a Primarch. I'm, like, not even 6 feet tall. But apparently I'm being corrupted by chaos. You're watching it happen in real time. Don't tell the Inquisition. Thanks. Yeah, overall, again, really really curious about sort of the underlying dynamic of the idea that things that were worshipped as positive throughout human history are manifesting as these really, really evil gods, right? The manifestations of evil in the universe. And that they're bundled up under the guise of chaos. Kind of weird because, you know, Zeach, definitely a god of chaos and things getting all twisted up. But Nurgle seems like the god of not chaos, right? And he seems like the god of never changing anything. Because that's what death is, right? A dead thing is something that just never changes. So, again, there's some weird religious philosophy here. I'm glad you guys stuck around for it. Remember, check out my Patreon, and a huge thanks to all my patrons. You guys are great and are helping me make this channel better every time. And of course, check out my second channel for different themed React videos. Check out my Instagram. Check out my merch store. As you can see, we're selling the coffee mug. And I will see you guys later.